Wake up! The stock market is crashing. Layoffs have surged more than 200%. We are being warned a depression is coming. Look, I'm trying to find the words to describe the economic carnage that we're witnessing right now. Even before President Trump unveiled his new tariffs, the U.S. economy was rapidly heading in the wrong direction. Layoffs were soaring and stock prices were steadily falling. But now it is as if enormous amounts of gasoline have been suddenly poured on the fire. Trump's tariffs have caused a massive wave of panic on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 1,679 points on Thursday. That was the biggest decline that we've seen since the early days of the pandemic in 2020. The S&P 500, the Nasdaq, also experienced the largest declines that we've seen since 2020. Everywhere you look, there is carnage. The small-cap Russell 2000 index has now fallen more than 20% from the peak, and that officially puts it in bear market territory. What we are witnessing is absolutely horrifying. The reason why there is so much fear is because U.S. tariff rates will now be even higher than they were during the early days of the Great Depression. Trump's aggressive tariff moves are set to lift the U.S. tariff rate from just 2.5% last year to 22%, according to Fitch. That surpasses the roughly 20% tariff rate the United States charged following the infamous Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which set off a global trade war that economists say worsened the Great Depression. Our system is not designed to handle a shock like this. We needed to address our trade imbalances with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The European Union has condemned Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs as a major blow to the world economy, with world leaders going on the defensive as they digest what the bombshell measures will mean for global trade. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, "There seems to be no order in the disorder, no clear path through the complexity and chaos that's been created as all U.S. trading partners are hit." Responding to the 20% tariffs on EU exports to the United States, she said Brussels was finalizing a first package of countermeasures and preparing to implement more. And the Chinese are warning they will be implementing countermeasures. Nikkei Asia quoted China's Ministry of Commerce warning that it firmly opposes Trump's tariffs and will resolutely take countermeasures to safeguard its own rights and interests. The Commerce Ministry noted that the U.S. ignored the benefits of a global trading system, adding the so-called reciprocal tariffs, which are based on subjective and unilateral assessments by the United States, are not in line with the rules of international trade. They seriously jeopardize the legitimate rights and interests of the parties concerned and are typical of unilateral bullying. Our relations with China have been on a downhill trajectory for a long time, and now Chinese officials are absolutely furious. They know that their economy is gonna get hit hard, extremely hard, by these tariffs. In fact, pretty much all major Asian economies will get extremely hard hit by these tariffs, said Marcel Theliant, head of Asia Pacific at Capital Economics. Not only do Asian economies face higher tariffs than many others, they're also more dependent on U.S. goods demand than most. Now, if you follow this channel, as I hope that you do, you'll know that I've written much about how dependent we have become on imports from China. But the truth is, we've also become highly dependent on imports from other Asian nations as well. For example, the new 46% tariff on goods from Vietnam will be extremely painful for U.S. consumers because we import vast amounts of clothing, toys, furniture, and shoes from that country. In fact, almost 1/3 of all footwear imports came from Vietnam in 2023. Nike shares dropped nearly 12% in afternoon trading Thursday. Adidas and other major footwear players also rely heavily on Vietnam. Adidas said it will evaluate the tariffs and monitor how they will affect its business. Nike did not immediately respond to CNBC's request for comment. Nearly a third of all footwear imports in the U.S. came from Vietnam in 2023, the most recent full-year data available, according to the Footwear Distributors and Retailers of America, an industry trade group. The era of cheap shoes is ending. Of course, the exact same thing could be said about countless other product categories. Peter Baum, the chief operating officer of Baum Essex, is warning that this is how you start a global depression. He's the chief financial officer and chief operating officer of Baum Essex. That's a New York-based manufacturer with licenses to make products for brands like Nautica, Betsy Johnson, and Steve Madden. During the first Trump administration in 2019, Baum moved factories from China to the Philippines, Cambodia, Vietnam, and India. He told CNBC on Wednesday that the reciprocal tariffs would do massive damage to his company. Baum said, "This is how you start a global depression. After 80 years and 5 generations, Trump has just put us out of business. We have not seen an economic event of this magnitude in a long time. Analysts at JP Morgan are warning that we're facing a substantial macroeconomic shock and that U.S. consumers should brace themselves for substantially higher prices." JP Morgan noted that the tariffs would hike taxes on Americans by $660 billion a year. That is the largest tax increase in recent memory by a long shot. It'll cause prices to surge too, adding 2% to the Consumer Price Index, a measure of U.S. inflation that struggled to come down to earth in recent years. Well, as this economic shock reverberates throughout the U.S. economy, large numbers of people are going to lose their jobs. Of course, this is already happening. According to Challenger Gray and Christmas, layoffs in the U.S. were 205% higher in March 2025 than they were in March 2024. 205% higher. Last month's 275,240 job cuts, fueled by widespread firings engineered by billionaire Elon Musk's Department of Government officially, DOGE, according to outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas. March's layoffs represent the third highest monthly total ever recorded, Challenger said. The two previous highly monthly totals were recorded in April 2020 and May 2020, when more than 671,000 and 397,000 job cuts, respectively, were recorded, and that was due, to the pandemic. The pandemic shuttering the U.S. economy, according to its data. Can you just believe what I've said? Let me repeat it. March's layoffs represent the third highest monthly total ever recorded. The two previous highest monthly totals were recorded in April and May 2020 due to the pandemic. The only time we've seen worse months was during the early days of the pandemic back in 2020. And now, the extreme disruption caused by the new tariffs will inevitably result in even more layoffs. In fact, Stellantis immediately announced a wave of layoffs following the unveiling of the new tariffs, and as a result, some U.S. workers will also be temporarily laid off. Among those to be laid off are 900 U.S. hourly employees who make powertrains and stampings that supply the affected Canadian and Mexican plants, Stellantis said Thursday. The temporary layoffs are due to reduced production prompted by the tariffs. This is serious. We're going to witness such a dramatic shift in the auto industry. Trump's 25% tariffs on imported vehicles to the U.S. have taken effect, but the impacts of the new levies on investors and the global automotive industry will play out over the months, if not years to come. The 25% tariffs are on any vehicle not assembled in the U.S., which S&P Global Mobility reports accounted for 46% of the roughly 16 million vehicles sold domestically last year. The White House has said it also plans to place tariffs on some auto parts, such as engines and transmissions. Those are set to take effect no later than May the 3rd. The global economy was already slowing down significantly A disruption of this magnitude threatens to throw it in a state of complete and utter chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, we have not seen anything like this since the Great Depression of the 1930s, and that should deeply alarm all of us. I need to tell you that Michael Snyder's new book, entitled Why, is available in paperback and for the Kindle. You'll find it on Amazon.com. He's also written 8 other books that are available on Amazon, including Chaos, End Times, 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of Michael's books, you help to support the work he's doing. These are such troubled times, and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ, saying, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." If you've not already done so, we strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. Thank you for watching.